Hello, everyone, and welcome back to How to Build Like AWS, the show where we take real customer stories, speak to the developers behind them, so you can build solutions like AI summarization. We're going to be going into an interesting story from Carrier from a couple of years ago when they first jumped into the world of AI, but focusing a lot on how we would modernize that application. Now, 2 years later, where the landscape has changed a lot since then. With me is Gareth Ludgate. Gareth, do you want to introduce yourself to everyone and do our intro question of what was the first application you built?
Hey, Steph, thank you. Yeah, my name is Gareth Floodgate. I'm a senior solutions developer with the AWS Pace team. So our job at Pace is to take customer challenges and look to find innovative solutions to those and accelerate those workloads into the cloud. To answer your question about my first ever app, so this spins right back to when I was a teenager. So I've always been a builder and I've always been interested in solving problems. And I was working as a student admin in secondary or high school. Every year, new students would come in, and the system at the time was intranetware, so a Novell system going back some time. But every year, new accounts needed to be added en masse, so kind of 120 plus accounts every year for students. And that was tedious, it was error prone, and the admins generally made mistakes, and there was all sorts of dramas when they did. And so I took it upon myself to write a VBA application, and we've come a long way since, but a VBA application that was using the Novell controls for ActiveX, no less, to load the data in and then mass add new user accounts. So the net result of that was 0 errors on the first year that we used it. And it took a minute or less instead of hours and mistakes. So there you go.
I love that. When I first started coding, that was also the way I learned. And someone's also put love VBA to throw back to learn VBA. It's awesome. Let us know in the chat, anyone a VBA fan? I want to know now. We've got a couple of highs. Hello from Canada. Thank you so much for joining so early. I hope it's on the East Coast time zone. And always happy to attend your session. Thank you so much. Throughout this video, please feel free to put any comments, questions, wherever you're watching live, or if you're watching us on demand, especially on YouTube, you can put any comments, questions on that, and we will make sure to get back to you. But let's get into today's session. So we are going to be talking about the Carrier solution that Gareth was involved in. But before we do you want to explain a little bit who Carrier are, Gareth?
Yeah, sure. So Carrier is a US headquartered global leader in climate and energy solutions. So they have a presence in 160 plus countries around the globe and provide residential and commercial HVAC systems and what they call cool chain solutions, so frozen storage. Interesting fact, Carrier can trace its history back to the invention of modern air conditioning, by a one Willis Carrier in 1902.
Wow. Oh my goodness. There's so much data and richness when it comes to that kind of thing. Brilliant. So let's have a little bit of a backstory of what was the solution and the work that you did with Carrier.
Yeah, sure. So Carrier came to us looking to find ways to gain productivity across their various spaces. And they were aware of GenAI as an emerging technology. And the leadership had set a goal to improve productivity across the businesses. So they came to us with 5 use cases, and we whittled them down to 2, which we took forward into our prototype. But the one which arguably had the highest priority was of the most potential short-term gain and indeed long-term strategic gain was the ability to summarize calls from their call center agents at speed. So just to give you some background on that, when an agent takes a call, they work with the customer, hopefully resolve the customer query. Some of those can be long calls, right? So they range anywhere from, let's say, 5 minutes up to sometimes 60 minutes or even in excess.
Yeah.
And when those calls finish, the agents have to write summaries of those calls. They have to write notes. Now, you
Mhm.
can imagine on a short call, maybe that's not such an overhead.
Yeah.
But on a 60-minute call, that's a big overhead, right? They have to sit, they have to write, and the outcome of the notes, because people are humans, will invariably be different depending on the individual. They won't have a structure, or they won't have
Mhm.
different varying, should I say, levels of detail.
Yeah. Yeah, even as simple, like you said, when we think of meeting notes, you will probably have different ways that your peers would write meeting notes, how you would write meeting notes. And if you need to extract that data and it's not in the right format or not in the right style, it's going to take a lot longer to summarize. But yeah, so what was the next step?
So once we agreed the use case with the customer, part of our mechanism is we work back from the customer problem. So we did a deep dive with the customer on what data did they have available, what were the particular pain points, and from that we built a proposal for the customer,
Mhm.
and then we started building.
Okay, nice. We love this working backwards technique from your guys' team. It's one of the best things. And if you haven't heard of that, if you have any questions about working backwards either, please feel free to email us at capitalleadership at amazon.com. But before we move away from this kind of backstory, we've had an interesting question, which is you mentioned that you had five, I think you said five different kind of target areas and you chose two. Do you have any tips for setting a good success goal for when you work with customers, which I think we'll jump into later, but any tips on this, Gareth?
So I think one of the key tips is, are those we call them success criteria, are they measurable? Right. So
Mm,
you can you put physical numbers against them? Not all success criteria can be measured, and some can
okay.
only be measured in the future. But one example might be, can I reduce, for this, for example, the time to summarize a call from, let's say arbitrarily 20 minutes down to less than 5 minutes.
Right. And what was the success criteria for this solution?
So actually, this was one of the success criteria. It was summarize in 5 minutes or less.
Oh, perfect. It's a good segue. Yeah, having a good success metric for any, especially things like using GenAI and modernizing your applications or transitioning to it, you have to justify why we spent this time on it. So if you
Mm.
are looking, and hopefully this episode will inspire you to do that, think about what your success criteria is so that you can get the benefit and show the benefit from it. So you decided this, you did the working backwards, and what did you decide to build?
So from this, we decided, and again, focusing on the summarization, to build a system that would take the audio recordings from the existing telecom system and generate some key info from those recordings. And that key info was sentiment. So was this positive, neutral, or negative?
Mhm,
To summarize the call, to provide a
mhm.
succinct summarization of the call, and key words, so key topic
Okay.
words, to give quantitative data around the type of calls that the customer was receiving.
I see, because I guess this is going to be passed on to someone else, and you can use this data for other areas. So now you have these kind of buckets. What was the process for building this kind of solution?
So for this solution, obviously, as calls come in, they complete. That's kind of an event-based architecture. So we really kind of key in on that and use the finishing of the calls, the audio availability, and put a step function behind those events. And that
Mhm.
step function allowed us to take the audio recording, transcribe it into text. It's worth saying that the focus of this prototype was English, but
Mhm.
transcribe does support other languages as well.
Good tip.
Once we transcribed it, we then put it through a multi-step process. So the first was uh, sentiment. So we analyzed the sentiment. We then performed the summarization. And for that summarization, we added what we would call a quality loop, because one of the key things that we have to be careful of is we're summarizing this text, but are we losing any of its meaning?
Mm.
So we had a loop in the summarization where we would take the output of the summary, and then we would perform some semantic similarity analysis. And if it didn't meet a particular threshold, we would go around and say, hey, that's not good enough. Let's do this again.
Yeah.
And then finally, from that summary, we would extract the key topic words and store that data in Dynamo.
Ah, I see. Okay. So we have like this architecture, the process, and also what the success criteria was there. Where you obviously mentioned some of the AI tools, like some of the tools such as transcribe and things like that. Where did AI come into this specifically?
So the AI really comes in when we start to look at sentiment, summarization, and keywords.
Okay.
So the summarization, and this almost sounds ancient saying it now, but we were using, we decided to use Claude 2 for summarization. At that time, that was state of the art at the time that we were building this. And then for the topic, the keyword extraction, we actually used Jurassic 2 Ultra again, going back. At the time, we were looking at these models, and Claude was very good at summarization, and still is. But the Jurassic 2 Ultra is very good at more terse output. So we chose that for the keyword generation.
What do you mean by terse?
Less verbose in its output.
Ah, okay.
So Claude likes to talk, whereas Jurassic was very good at giving it. We could give it a prompt that said, "Okay, give us a very focused output," which was 3 words.
I see. So I can summarize those things. Excellent. And as you said, by using this solution, you were able to take that huge summarization and turn it into a review that was done in less than 5 minutes. Yes. So the great customer story, I'll share the link in the chat if you want to deep dive into seeing where this one came from. But let's get into a little bit of the next step. So we're going to talk a little bit about modernization as well in a bit, and stick around as well, because we will be doing a demo of looking at how to modernize and compare different applications. But moving into the next stuff, how was this a challenging thing to build? Because like you said, it felt very simple in comparison to the tools that we have now. But do you want to quickly cover what was different about this and how it was kind of a challenging time to build?
I think one of the key aspects that made it particularly challenging was for us as well. This was one of our first engagements with GenAI. So we also had a lot of learning. And at Pace, we do a lot of learning on the fly with our customers, right? So sometimes we're not experts in this, and sometimes we need to accelerate our learning very quickly. This was one of these times. And I think what was particularly challenging was working out which were the best models to give us the best outcomes for each of the aspects that we talked about. So we spent a fair bit of time in some Jupyter notebooks, experimenting and looking at what prompts we could use, what outputs we could get, and given the models available to us at the time, looking at the different trade-offs, latency, cost, etc. What were the best models for each job?
Right. And like we said, we're going to go into a demo in a bit of how you can do this a lot faster than we did back there, which is model evaluations. If anyone has any questions, comments, please feel free to pop them in the chat. And also, if you want to give us any feedback or topics you'd like us to dive into, scan that QR code and you can send us a message in there. But let's get into the bulk of what we want to talk about, which is technology modernization when it comes to AI. So Gareth, have things really changed a lot since 2023?
So yes, have the core structures of what we do changed? Not so much, but have the models that we have access to now changed? Yes, absolutely, and dramatically so. So I think that's one of the key aspects to dive into as well. Is when we built this solution, we were arguably very much at the tip of the spear in terms
Hmm.
of using brand new models. Now
Yeah.
we have, we have Claude 4, Claude 4.5.
Yeah.
We have other techniques available to us. We have RAG even more so as normal. And
Hmm.
I think if we look back at what we did then versus what we do now, we used a specific transformer model for our semantic similarity. Well, we
Okay.
could do we could use techniques like LLM Judge. We could do something with rogue scoring now, and those are
Okay.
techniques that were very have evolved over this time. So I think
Hmm.
what we did back then was arguably more complex than it is now. And another aspect is we use multiple models for multiple jobs. The
Okay.
newer models, like again, to come back to Claude 4 or even Nova Pro,
Yeah. Hmm.
would potentially allow us to do that all in one prompt.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's so cool. These things have changed. It feels like not much time has passed, and yet you can now use a lot more of these complex things together. When we talk about, you mentioned things like RAG, but in comparison before, when deciding what you would do now, what are general trade-offs that you have to consider? Because before you were having to look at these different models, things like that, but what are the new things you have to worry about when comparing different models or different trade-offs with other services?
I think now we look at it from a slightly different lens because we have a degree of maturity. So we know
Okay.
that we're working with models that we know will give responses, whereas
Hmm.
before perhaps we were looking, well, okay, will this model give me actually the response that I need? But now we know that those models will. So now we look at trade-offs like cost, performance, right? If I look
Hmm.
at Claude Sonnet versus Nova Pro versus and so on and so on, I
Hmm.
can I can, again, perhaps using model evaluation, which we'll come to, I can say,
Hmm.
okay, I have a known set of prompts that I have perhaps a known set of ground truths I know the answers to.
Hmm.
What are the outputs, and can I measure them using various metrics? And then looking through a different lens, what's the cost latency trade-off for those?
Yeah. And those are big decisions. Like cost, my background is cost optimization, and that's being I'll always focus on. But things like latency, you've got to make these decisions. Like, do you need these things instantly? Can you put them offline? Like, what these comparisons are crucial. And I think what I'm concerned people will do is they start building and they just use whatever the default is, and they're not taking into consideration these bigger pictures. But go on.
I was going to say that there's also the aspect of what type of task am I performing? Is
Yeah.
it an offline? So this scenario here, actually,
Yeah.
we don't mind too much if there's a little bit of extra latency, but maybe
Yeah.
in a chatbot scenario, if we're
Yeah.
after faster responses, we do care, right?
Hmm.
So it's thinking about the type of workload that you have also.
Yeah. So let's think about modernization of our. So you have this application before. What would you do now? And also people who maybe have applications that are a couple of years old that are Gen AI based. What are some tips for giving to the audience for what they should do to modernize those applications?
Okay. So I think one of the first things to do is look at the models you're using. Is
Hmm.
the decision that you made whenever you made it still the right decision?
Hmm.
And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe there's trade-offs that you can make that weren't available to you before. Maybe
Yeah.
there's models that are just as applicable but more performant or cost less. And then
Hmm.
how do you go about evaluating that, right? So potentially your solution has human in the loop feedback, potentially it doesn't, but you can go ahead and perform an evaluation against the data that you already have, your production output, to see, okay, well, I know I have this level of performance and I can measure it using factors like correctness, fairness, coherence. If I pick a different model and apply the
Hmm.
same data sets and prompts and outputs, do I get the same results? And if
Hmm.
I get the same or similar or good enough results, then I can look through a different lens and say, okay, so this is a potential candidate to move forward, but what are the trade-offs or indeed improvements that I take from this? Is the latency better? Is the cost better? And so on.
Okay. What, any other tips?
I would say continue looking at new services, right? So if perhaps you implemented a solution using RAG before, but it uses a solution you built yourself, or is perhaps hand rolled, is there now a managed service that takes care of that for me? And does it make sense to move to that and reduce my code, reduce my development overhead? Can I optimize something as a result of that?
Yeah, because even one of the examples we're not going to touch on a deep dive today was there was a call transcribe analytics that exists now that you could take advantage of, that you could find that would be applicable in this situation that didn't exist back then. Like Gareth said, when they made this, it was a brand new thing and they had to put everything from scratch. But these things change. So doing those things regularly. We actually had a question, which is, how often should you modernize your GenAI applications?
That's a great question. I think the answer, as with everything, is it depends. So should I modernize? Does it give me a benefit? And not to keep coming back to it, but that benefit may be improved customer experience through lower latency. If I have a chatbot, and I can deliver answers to my customers quicker, maybe there's a reason to do that. If I'm working with an offline system and there's no real differentiator in faster responses, does it really matter? Maybe not. That's a business decision, but it might not do. Equally, if you can prove that changing from Model X to Model Y doesn't diminish your outcomes, but saves you 10, 20%, that's a reason to perhaps modernize.
Yeah, that's a good question. And the next question we also have, which is, how do you compare models? I guess the same models. Then, well, that actually is a good segue onto what we're going to do a quick demo of, which is Bedrock model evaluation. So obviously, Gareth was talking about comparing. If you have an older application that uses an older model, this is going to be a great time to use this tool to compare and see what you had before and see what those improvements are going to be, whether what it's returned, the latency, the cost, so many different aspects. So Gareth, should we jump into the demo?
Sure, yeah.
All right, bring up your screen.
Okay.
All right, what can we see here?
Okay, so right now I am in the Amazon Bedrock AWS console. And if we look down here, we have the ability now to perform model evaluations. And how do we go about doing that? So when we perform model evaluation, we're asking potentially an LLM to check its own homework, or to check the homework, if you like, of another model. And in this instance, we have multiple options here. So we have automatic evaluation. So we will focus on LLM as a judge in this quick demo. But what we can also do is have human teams, right? So either an AWS managed team or indeed your own team to do that evaluation. So they can look at the prompt versus the ground truth versus the outputs and do the evaluation as human beings rather than relying on a model. Okay. So let's walk through how we might do one of these. So we go and we create, we'll create LLM as a judge here. Do an evaluation. We'll leave the evaluation name as it is.
I think it's in my live.
Yeah, my live demo. And now we pick an evaluated model. So this is the model that is going to be judging the outputs of your target model. So in this instance, we will pick, let's pick Nova Pro.
We love a bit of Nova.
Okay. And now we say, okay, what is the inference source? You can bring your own inference responses, or we can build them using Bedrock models. So in this instance, let's pick, we'll pick Nova Pro. So we'll ask Pro to.
Pro to check Pro.
And then we can pick some different metrics here. So how helpful is a good one. Correctness is a very good measure of, is this response correct relative to expectation? Completeness, is it actually complete in its output? And coherent, so does it make sense fundamentally?
Yeah.
and there are other built-in quality metrics that we can pick when using LLM as a judge, but we can also do responsible AI metrics, which is really important. So do we have any harmful outputs, any stereotyping, and even refusal? Did the model refuse to answer a question? Because something, even in your prompts, you may have relatively innocuous, or what you believe in your use case to be, you would expect an output, but perhaps the model says it cannot for some reason.
Okay.
We can also create custom metrics here, but we won't do that for this. If you want to deep dive into that, you can go and look at the documentation on how to build custom metrics. So what we're going to do is give a very small data set. And I have one here. So I am just evaluating several questions around S3. And I'll deep dive into those in a second. And then I provide an output location where the report should be delivered. For this, I'll just create a new service role, or you can use an existing. Obviously, you can choose to encrypt this output if you want, and I can create that job. Okay. While that's running, let me take a moment just to show what the JSON format looks like. So the file that I selected is JSONL. JSON. So what we have is a line for each prompt and response. And here we have expanded trees of reasoning. The prompt, so how do I check if an object exists in S3 bucket, as an example. And then a reference response, which is something like, to check if the object exists, use the head object command. Okay. And then optionally a category. Now, this model evaluation you can see is running, and for the brevity of time, this can take a little while to run. So I've got one prepared that I did earlier, and we can go and dive into the outputs of that. So now I see an evaluation summary that gives me some information. I look in the metrics that I picked, responsible metrics, and then I can look at a breakdown of all of those. So here I have a very, very small prompt set. I only put two items in, right? Okay. So these statistics are somewhat limited, but you imagine if you had a large data set of prompts in your production application, you could perform the evaluation versus current model, you know what your outputs are. And if you wanted to move to new model, let's say Nova Premier as an example, right? What does that look like when I then run the evaluation here? So if I take that prompt, expected output, and I can start to deep dive into that. So obviously I see
the results.
This was helpfulness. Let's look at correctness, right? So I can start to look at each of these, and I see the ground truth that I supplied, and I see the generated output. And if I want to, I can click here for a full view and actually inspect the full text of each of those. But we're not just limited to job evaluations for just our own prompts. We can also do evaluation of RAG.
And Gareth, I've got to interrupt. We're almost at time, so I'll stop you there. But it's just we're diving into the demo, which we love. But the inspiration is that you can now do RAG, which we didn't know until we started diving into this a little bit. So go and try model evaluation for your RAG as well. But thank you so much for diving into some of this stuff. Hopefully we've inspired you to go and start to have a look and modernize your applications and start to use things like a model evaluation to compare and contrast how your solutions are going to keep up to date with the ever-growing technology. And our 3 kind of prompts for the end of today's session for everyone to go and do are: always think about your success metrics, your applications, and especially with GenAI, what does good look like? Try and modernize as the times go by. Like Gareth said, look regularly for new technologies, and try model evaluation to compare what you currently use with any potential future ones. Couple of other bits to note is Gareth is going to be doing a talk at reInvent. So head on over to his session, AIM 404. for that. And if you want to follow any updates of the show, check out the Builder Studio blog, How to Build Like AWS, which is in the show notes. And also join the Custom Acceleration LinkedIn group to learn more about what we do. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much, Gareth. I hope everyone has a great rest of your week, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.